we're going to move on to the, audience Q&A. Nick, this first question is for you. What types of analytic technologies do you see moving the needle in the near term, either as standalone or an integrated technology?
That's a great question. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, my background's actually in molecular diagnostics. My previous company, Invisible Sentinel, we made point-of-care molecular diagnostics, and were ultimately acquired by bioMérieux, which also serves the cell therapy industry with rapid microbial detection tools. But they also have a technology out of their BioFire subsidiary that does extremely rapid molecular testing, results within hours. I think some of their next generation platform is minutes. So I think, that's the type of tool where, again, you can provide real-time information, regarding what's happening with the product kind of in process that we're going to see at least, I would say even in the next couple of years, potentially, help advance the field. I think one of the inherent challenges that we'll face is agencies' acceptance of more and more rapid microbial testing, or use inline microbial testing rather than final drug product as a surrogate. I think that's going to be one of the keys to be able to realize these shorter vein-to-vein times with shorter manufacturing times. So that, the only way to really be able to do that, I think, would be comprehensive, extremely rapid molecular testing. And we'll start to see some of those technologies, I think, sooner than later, get adopted in this field.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Will, I have a question for you, specifically directed to you. Earlier in our conversation, you were referencing leaky bag and the particulate problem. And so this person is asking, what is the solution to the leaky bag and particulate problem in medical grade plastics? Is it just better manufacturer suppliers, or is it a tech problem?
Yeah, so it's both. It's the manufacturing technology of the bags per se, right? They are medical grade, due to the fact that cell therapy manufacturing requires things like control rate freezing of products, in the final stage of it, as well as dealing with different, pressures that happen during cell growth. Bags start to leak. Whenever a bag starts to leak, that's an event that causes the product not necessarily to be discarded, but definitely going into a stronger analytical monitoring type of profile or protocol. Particulates are, you can make a plastic without particulates. Pharmaceutical grade bag manufacturers have shown us that over the decades. It's definitely possible to do. The problem is the incentive to those medical grade bag manufacturers to actually invest in technologies of the same scale as their not competitors but colleagues in the pharmaceutical grade industry do.
Great, thanks, Will. Thanks for that great answer. And we're going to move on. We have quite a few questions. I want to get through as many as we can. Nick, I'll direct this one to you, if that's okay. What are the implications of reducing environmental control requirements with respect to total COGs for cell therapy manufacturing? Is this enough of a case to pursue a fully closed, highly automated process train?
It's a good question. From my perspective, it would be significant. One of the biggest challenges with manufacturing in the space is the facility that's required, the infrastructure, the SOPs required, and the staff and training to be able to maintain that facility. Those are very capital intensive. So the more flexibility you have is, with regard to where you can manufacture, I think that's going to, drop costs, double-digit percentages as it relates to the cost to manufacture. Well, I don't know, you might even have more insight than I do as far as specific, dollar implications here.
Oh yeah, definitely. Double digit is actually, it's better than, it's not quite triple digits, but it makes it very attractive. The thing is, the process needs to be at a certain level of maturity to be fully automated. the more change you have at the at the very beginning of automation, automation is not just you have equipment, you also need to generate code that integrates that equipment with your process, right? Generating code is still, AI is going to help with that over the long term, but for the time being, it still requires a lot of skills to, program like a manufacturing execution system, at the high level, to perform unit operations in exactly the same way consistently all the time. An immature process doesn't lend to that. It requires changes in this sequence of events pretty much on a constant basis. So there is a sweet spot in the course of commercialization where you have, I want to say, maybe a 90% control over your process. The variability is foreseeable, and you know what's going to happen, when it makes sense to double down and lean full into automation. But again, the sweet spot is usually, I would say, late stage 3, if you go 3, or if you pivotal on phase 2, maybe in the first year of manufacturing, when you can do that. So that means you go live with a CDMO, in your manufacturer over this time. You gain the data, gain the experience with your process, to the point where you feel your process understanding is good enough. Then you go and really invest into automation and maybe do it on-prem in-house.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for their thoughtful response to that question. I want to move on to, this person is asking, what type of technologies have you found beneficial in closing your processes? So perhaps feel free to, from an industry perspective, from your own perspective within, to date in your professional experience. Nick, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I mean, in our experience to date, linking the unit operations and closing them is still, I would say, surprisingly manual, right? I mean, there's, what we're seeing is with the group, with the vendors who make equipment for specific unit operations, they're adapting and now coming out with consumables that allow for you to connect them in a closed fashion to the next piece of equipment downstream. So, if you're moving from one piece of equipment to another for different unit operations, that's what we're seeing as far as how to close it. We're seeing new consumables that will allow you to do that. The other option, of course, is to consolidate the process onto one instrument. Like I mentioned earlier, the Prodigy is building a number of modules, into the system that allow for different unit operations, but kind of all contained, on the one platform. That's the other, I would say, current option for closing down the process.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Nick. Will, before we move on to the next question, I want to talk for you the opportunity to respond there if you'd like.
Yeah. I totally agree. The Prodigy, Miltenyi is a company that is really good in small volume fluid processing and movement. So their unit is amazing, and it's a really good starting point from automation of the entire, from closing the process perspective, right? Lonza has a system called Cocoon that's supposedly doing the same thing. We're playing with it. It delivers. Cytiva is also in this market, just based on their dominance of cell counting and washing and all this kind of cell washing and all this kind of. So there is plenty of opportunity there to work with these automation companies or equipment companies on integration, on closing process. They're very interested in that. They're all working into the same direction to support this industry.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, what are some tactical activities innovators can undertake to optimize CMC process and analytical development? Will, would you be willing to kick us off for that one?
Okay. Can you come again with that question? So what's the CMC process in analytical development?
Yeah, what are some tactical activities innovators can undertake to optimize the CMC process and analytical development?
And analytical, okay, all right. So analytical development really needs to look into what's possible rather than what's established. And what I'm saying with that is, we've been coming out of the biotech industry and this is along the CMC lines, right? We're coming out of the biotech industry with recombinant, with, making monoclonal antibodies or making proteins of different kinds. So we have been dealing with a lot of criticism and judgment coming from regulators, not the least the FDA. We're talking about our market here, and this has changed quite dramatically. Today's FDA is much more interested in the big picture outcome than the individual, what procedures do we have in place type of questions. And so what we have is the opportunity to really work with our regulators, work with the health authorities worldwide, actually, but certainly with the FDA on, okay, this is our modality. This is what it's going to do. We come out of the type A, type B, type C meetings with them, and work with them on understanding where we need to be and what opportunities should we go for. When it comes to new technology implementation, they're very unhappy with the general analytical picture of cell therapy today. As when you follow Peter Marks, you hear him say that all the time. They're also very unhappy with okay, let's not follow through on traditional models necessarily if critical thinking allows us to see a benefit, for the patient in the long run, by taking a risk and going with a new technology. So that's the context of how analytical development should be structured today, when it comes to controlling of processes. And the other thing is, in our CMCs, good Lord, when and this is not a secret, right? When we went live with our BLA, every manufacturer of every one of the 800 items of the bill of material was part of this BLA. There's way too much information in there than it makes even sense, right? From a perspective of controlling that and managing that in the context of changes that need to happen, right? Our regulatory affairs department is really busy. And so CMC should really focus a little bit more on communication, conversations with FDA, conversations with health authorities that have a stance and a certain degree of requirements around, what technologies are better or more attractive to them. But in general, having that conversation, having this constant communication channel open, allows for a couple of things that have been really helpful for us. For example, closing a batch record before you release a batch has been a big deal prior to cell therapy for cell therapy manufacturers. It was never even a question for Kite as we went live. We never had to do that. We delivered product and infused product, hundreds of days before the batch record was closed, with open deviations and things like that. So when you have these conversations, these opportunities arise.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Will. I think we can try to squeeze in a response to one more question. Manufacturing is a critical part of the vein-to-vein time. Do you see challenges with the orchestration of hospital to doctor to patient, logistics, manufacturing, logistics, infusion as you scale? I'm going to go ahead and say the answer to that is yes. But what would you say? Well, I guess very briefly, what would you say those challenges are?
You asking me or Nick?
We can start with you, and then we can hear from Nick quickly. That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. So wow, our business includes the both the apheresis process as well as the infusion of the cell therapy modality we manufacture. So what that means is that part of our operation, they need to be integrated into our supply chain strategy. They need to be integrated into our operational control strategy. From a quality perspective, I do this all the time. But what's really important is they need to be respected and trained on how things need to work. Specifically, we're dealing Kite deals in hematologic malignancies, so oncology departments, transplant physicians, their staff, right, the entire nursing staff. All of these people have a say and have experience to be respected and to be heard. And as we go through training of a new facility out there, a new hospital out there, cancer center or whatever, we take this into consideration. We have a partnership rather than, okay, this is something we offer you. tell us how many patients you're going to need to be served, right? So this is a constant relationship management, customer relationship management operation that's going on in our commercial operation, and it's really important to look at that. Can't leave them alone.
Thanks, Will. Good. And Nick?
Yeah, so I
Final
guess
thoughts on
briefly,
that?
yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, there's going to be, inherent logistical challenges, but, as this particular modality becomes more and more mainstream, more institutions are getting experience with, managing the logistics, and the teams are becoming more adept to it. But what I would say specifically is, the shorter vein to vein time from a, patient benefit standpoint, potential clinical outcome is going to trump, any additional challenges logistically that, would be created by shorter vein to vein time. So, ultimately we'll figure it out.
Shorter vein to vein and consistently shorter vein to vein.